Somewhere between the decade we remember fondly and the world we live in now, something changed about the food on the grocery store shelf. Not the packaging, that got brighter and louder. Not the names, most of those stayed the same. What changed was what was inside. Quietly, gradually, without announcement or apology, the ingredients in foods that millions of Americans had grown up trusting were reformulated, extended, and stripped of the things that had made them real. And the process happened so slowly across so many products over so many years that most people never noticed it was happening at all. Today, we are counting down 10 American junk foods that were actually healthier in the 1970s than the versions available today. Products whose original formulations contained fewer additives, less processed sugar, more real fat, more recognizable ingredients, and in some cases, nutritional profiles that would surprise anyone who assumes the oldest version of a thing must be the worst. But this story is not simply about nostalgia for old candy bars. It is about something more significant, about how the food industry changed not just what Americans ate, but what Americans understood food to be. By the time we reach number 1, you may find yourself looking at the grocery store shelf with different eyes than you brought to it before. Number 10. Cracker Jack. Cracker Jack has been sold continuously since 1896, which makes it one of the oldest snack brands in American history. And the version sold through the 1970s was a different product from what occupies the box today in ways that matter nutritionally. The original formula, popcorn and peanuts coated in a molasses and sugar candy glaze, relied on real molasses for its characteristic deep, slightly bitter sweetness, a flavor produced by the complex sugars and trace minerals that molasses contains. By the 1980s and into the following decades, the molasses component was reduced and in some reformulations effectively replaced with corn syrup and artificial flavoring, producing a candy coat that was sweeter but thinner in flavor and stripped of the trace nutritional content that molasses had contributed. The peanuts, once present in generous quantity, became fewer and smaller over time as manufacturers responded to cost pressure. The 1970s Cracker Jack had more peanuts, more molasses, and a depth of flavor that the current version approximates but does not match. It was still candy-coated popcorn, but it was candy-coated popcorn made from things that had grown in the ground. Number 9. Peanut Butter Cups. The peanut butter cup, as sold in the 1970s, used a peanut butter filling made with ingredients recognizable as food: peanuts, sugar, and a small amount of salt, combined in proportions that produced something close to the texture and flavor of real peanut butter. The chocolate used in the coating was formulated with cocoa butter as the primary fat, which gave it a clean snap and a melt-in-the-mouth quality that cocoa butter uniquely produces. Subsequent decades brought reformulations in the service of cost reduction and extended shelf stability. The peanut butter filling in many mass-market versions now contains partially hydrogenated oils and various additives that the 1970s formula did not include. And the chocolate coating in lower-cost versions has seen the cocoa butter proportion reduced in favor of cheaper vegetable fats. The result is a product that looks identical to what your parents ate, that carries the same name and the same wrapper colors, and that delivers a slightly different nutritional and sensory experience than the original. The change was never announced. Most people never noticed it. The package looked exactly the same.
Number 8. Granola bars, the original version. The granola bar as a commercial product was born in the 1970s, and the original versions, introduced by companies that were responding to the decade's genuine interest in natural and whole foods, were made with oats, honey, nuts, and dried fruit in combinations that were genuinely close to homemade granola pressed into bar form. The sweetener was primarily honey or molasses. The fat came from nuts and a small amount of vegetable oil. The fiber content was high because the oats were largely whole, and the nuts and dried fruit added additional fiber and micronutrients. By the 1980s and through the 1990s, the commercial granola bar was reformulated repeatedly in the direction of palatability and shelf life. More sugar, often in the form of corn syrup or corn syrup solids, more processed chocolate or yogurt coatings, less whole grain oat, fewer nuts, more refined grain fillers. The granola bar of the 1970s was an imperfect thing, but it was built from real ingredients assembled with real intention. What replaced it kept the name and the shape and discarded most of the substance. Number 7. Yogurt, the plain version before the sugar revolution. Yogurt arrived in mainstream American grocery stores in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and the versions sold in the first decade of its American commercial life were dramatically simpler and lower in sugar than what now occupies most of the dairy case. The early commercial yogurts, from brands that have been selling it since those years, were made from milk and live bacterial cultures, period. The flavored versions contained fruit preserves added in modest quantities that provided flavor without transforming the product into dessert. A 6-ounce container of fruit yogurt in 1975 contained approximately 12 to 15 grams of sugar, most of it from the milk itself and a small amount from the fruit. The same size container of many mainstream flavored yogurts today contains 25 to 30 grams of sugar, much of it added sweetener, producing a product that is closer in sugar content to a small candy bar than to the fermented dairy food that gave yogurt its health reputation. The live cultures, the bacteria that made yogurt genuinely beneficial to digestive health, were present in the original versions at counts that current heat processing and extended shelf life requirements sometimes reduce significantly. What has kept the name has not always kept the promise.
Number 6. Breakfast cereal, pre-high fructose corn syrup. The pre-sweetened breakfast cereals of the 1970s, and there were many, marketed primarily to children with cartoon mascots and bright packaging, were products that most nutritionists then and now would not describe as health food. They contained sugar, they contained artificial color, they were not models of dietary wisdom. But most of them were sweetened with cane sugar or beet sugar rather than high fructose corn syrup, which was not introduced to breakfast cereal formulations in significant quantities until the early 1980s. The distinction matters because the human body metabolizes sucrose and high fructose corn syrup differently, and a body of research developed over the following decades suggests that the fructose component of high fructose corn syrup, metabolized primarily in the liver rather than throughout the body, may have particular implications for metabolic health that simple sucrose does not share to the same degree. The 1970s sugared cereal was not good for you, but it was sweetened with a form of sugar that the human body had been managing for thousands of years. The reformulation that followed was presented as a cost-saving measure. It was never presented as a health decision. That distinction deserves attention. Number 5. Potato chips, cooked in real oil. The potato chip in the 1970s was made from potatoes cooked in oil and salted. The oil was typically cottonseed oil or a similar stable vegetable oil that produced a clean, neutral flavor that allowed the potato taste to come through. The manufacturing process, while industrial, was relatively simple, and the ingredient list, while not short by homemade standards, was recognizable. What followed was a series of changes driven by cost and shelf life considerations. Partially hydrogenated oils appeared in the late 1970s and through the 1980s, introducing trans fats that the original formulas had not contained. Flavor additives multiplied. The potato itself, the primary ingredient, was bred for uniformity and yield rather than flavor, producing varieties optimized for the factory rather than the table. The 1970s potato chip was a simple, honest thing. It tasted like a potato cooked in oil because it was a potato cooked in oil. The versions that followed tasted like a potato-flavored product cooked in a trans fat blend and enhanced with flavor chemistry. The difference is not a matter of preference, it is a matter of what was in the bag.
Number 4. Ice cream bars, real dairy, real chocolate. The ice cream bar on a stick, sold from neighborhood ice cream trucks throughout the 1970s, was made with a vanilla ice cream base of genuine dairy fat content, milk, cream, sugar, eggs in the richer versions, and coated in a chocolate that contained actual cocoa butter as its primary fat. The cold temperature at which ice cream must be stored made shelf stability a lesser concern than in ambient temperature products, and as a result, the formulations changed more slowly than those of room temperature snacks. But change they did. Through the 1980s and beyond, the ice cream component in mass-market bars shifted toward lower dairy fat content, with milk proteins and gums and stabilizers compensating for the reduced cream. The chocolate coating in many brands shifted toward compound coatings based on palm oil and other vegetable fats, rather than cocoa butter. The product that emerged from these reformulations was colder and sweeter and longer lasting and less expensive, and it tasted approximately like the original, the way a photograph of a meal tastes approximately like dinner. Your grandfather knew the difference. He had eaten the original. Number 3. Canned soup before sodium became a marketing problem. This entry requires a slightly different frame than the others on this list because canned soup has not become less healthy in the same linear way that candy and chips have. It has become less healthy in a more complicated way that involves the removal of fat and the dramatic increase of sodium as a flavor compensator. The canned soups of the 1970s used real chicken fat, real beef tallow, and real cream in formulations that produced flavor through the interaction of fat with other ingredients. When the anti-fat movement of the 1980s persuaded food manufacturers to reduce or eliminate animal fats from their products, the flavor those fats had been providing had to be replaced with something. That something was primarily sodium. The reduced-fat, lower-calorie canned soups that emerged from this reformulation contained sodium levels that the original formulas had not required, because the original formulas were using fat to do what sodium does in the new versions: carry flavor, satisfy the palate, make the product worth eating. The 1970s can of chicken noodle soup had more fat, fewer additives, and a flavor that came from chicken rather than from a laboratory. It was not diet food. It was food.
Number 2. Bread before the additives multiplied. The commercial white bread of the 1970s was not the bread that a home baker would have made, and it was not the artisan sourdough that food culture has recently rediscovered. But it was made from flour, water, yeast, a small amount of sugar and salt, a small amount of shortening, and a handful of preservatives and dough conditioners that were, by the standards of what followed, relatively modest in number and quantity. The bread of subsequent decades accumulated an ingredient list that grew with each passing year. More dough conditioners, more emulsifiers, more preservatives to extend shelf life from days to weeks, more added sugars to accelerate browning and improve palatability, high fructose corn syrup appearing in place of or alongside cane sugar. The wheat itself changed. High-yield modern wheat varieties developed through the 1960s and 1970s produced flour with a different gluten structure than older varieties, and the fast-rising industrial fermentation process used in commercial baking left none of the fermentation time that traditional bread making used to make wheat more digestible. Number 1. Coca-Cola and the formula change that changed everything. At the top of this list sits not a junk food in the traditional sense, but a beverage, and specifically the difference between Coca-Cola as it was formulated through 1984 and Coca-Cola as it has been produced since the mid-1980s, when the company transitioned from cane sugar to high fructose corn syrup as its primary sweetener in the American market. This change has been discussed extensively in food culture circles since the rise of so-called Mexican Coke, the version of the drink still made with cane sugar for the Mexican market, which became sought after in the United States precisely because longtime Coke drinkers could taste the difference. The difference is real and has been confirmed in studies examining consumer preference and in the metabolic research examining how the two sweeteners behave differently in the body. The 1970s Coke,
made with cane sugar in glass bottles, carbonated at levels that the modern aluminum can sometimes does not match, was not a health drink. It contained significant sugar and no nutritional value beyond calories. Here is the truth that this entire countdown has been building toward. The junk food of the 1970s was not health food. It was never intended to be. The people who made it were not making nutritional decisions. They were making business decisions, flavor decisions, decisions about what would sell and what would satisfy. But the ingredients they were using and the processes they were applying were closer to real food than most of what carries those same brand names today. The reformulations that followed, driven by cost reduction, shelf life extension, the anti-fat movement, the rise of corn processing technology, and the relentless pressure of the publicly traded food company to improve quarterly margins, produced products that looked the same, cost less to make, and delivered a nutritional profile that the original manufacturers would not have recognized as their own. This happened gradually enough that no single change was alarming. Each reformulation in isolation seemed minor. A different sweetener here, a different fat there, an additional preservative, a slight reduction in the expensive real ingredient, and a slight increase in the cheaper synthetic one.